Okay, so good evening again to everybody. Welcome to an evening with Rob Anderson, who is a co-owner of Northumbria Painting Services with his wife Michelle, and he has a background in wargaming as well as model railway figures. Rob is a member of the South Tyneside O-Gauge group, and he's also one of the founding organisers of the North East O-Gauge exhibition, which will take place in Sunderland on the 30th of September and the 1st of October later this year, and is becoming a very valuable annual event in the north. Rob is also editor of the Italian Railway Society Journal, so if you want to know more about that, do ask. But tonight, Rob will take us through a step-by-step view of his techniques for painting figures, which incorporates many of the wargaming techniques. And please do, if you've got any specific questions, pop them into chat so that Rob can cover them. And if appropriate, as I said, we'll get you to unmute and you can ask questions yourself. And it's going to be a bit like Blue Peter. You know, this is one I prepared earlier, and we'll be able to take you through the stages of painting figures. So welcome, Rob. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. From what I would describe as a very wet north of England. We've just been talking about the weather before, and it looks as if it's nice everywhere else, more or less. Right. What I'm going to do tonight is I've already hot painted some figures because it's difficult to paint them and have them dry in the right length of time to be able to show people what we do. From a basic metal, which is what we use because we cast the figures from a white metal. It's predominantly tin. It does have a small amount of lead, but not a great lot. And that's how it flows in the molds. So we have our own figures that we do. So what I've done first is I'll show you this one. I'll hold it up there so you can see it.
Yep.
So what we'll do is we'll just have this figure all the way through in the different stages. Now it's blue, and the reason it's blue is because I've undercoated it with blue. I use it's a spray paint that's used by War Games company. Well, war gamers should we say, for one of the better words. Quite a few of the War Games companies now stock it, and it's by a firm called Colourforge. The reason we use the Tempest blue is it's a good cover for anything to do with the steam period, with the overalls and things like that, unless you go right back to Edwardian, which was black dominantly. But this Tempest blue is great for it because that's the colour you get when you spray them. Okay, so that's the colour they'll start out with. We do that with most of our figures. It depends on what we are painting though, because we use matte black as well, and we use white. Sometimes grey. It depends on what we're doing. If we're painting passengers, normally start life. If it's a green suit that somebody's wearing, it's green undercoat we use. Primer. Okay, so that's the start. Okay, so everybody can see that. Right. First thing we do is we put base colours on. I'll show you this one because we've done it. So what we've got there is the colours we use are acrylic. We don't use enamel paints. We only use acrylics. Part of the reason being, when I was younger, much younger, was about the early 80s, my mother used to complain about the smell of the enamels. So she made me start using acrylics. Now, stuck with them ever since. They're great to work with because they're water-based. The only thing I would ever say is with an acrylic, if you get it on your clothes, you haven't got much chance of getting it off. Even if it's wet, it'll never wash off. It's just the way it is. So always make sure that when you're painting, you've got something old on just in case. Comes off your hands without any problems, but not your clothes for some reason. It seems to stain them. What I've done with this one is, I'll hold it back up again. I started off, some of the paints we use is what I was talking to Philip from America there before, the Vallejo paint, which are like this. This one's a Prussian blue. Normally use that for what I would describe as the slightly washed out colours for the steam overalls. I mean, they did go right down to a very, very pale blue because the dye ran on them. They weren't fixed with a dye. It wasn't as the stuff is now. So what we do with that is, if there's any parts that haven't come out right with the primer, I'll touch it up with it's called a Prussian blue. That's on the jacket. For the trousers, to make them look different, and you could do it either way. You could do it on the jacket. You could do it all the same. I use a different blue. This one is a Citadel paints glue. It's called Calgar Blue. They've got the most unusual names for Citadel paints. They're the people who do Games Workshop, which are probably what everybody thinks is war gaming, but it's fantasy gaming that you'll see in the shops in Britain and I think across the world. So what I've done is I've painted the trousers in this colour, which gives it the lighter colour like that. And that's a starting place. Okay. Flesh. It's Vallejo again. It's a flat flesh. That's it. You can probably see by the state of these, they're well used. So the flat flesh is just painted onto the faces and the hands and taken from there. Just leave it as it is. The reason I'm explaining this is because the next one I'm going to show you is what we do after we've done these. The next part is white, the normal white. This is any white will do. It doesn't make any difference. The one that we tend to use is Army Painted White. It's another War Games one, but we get it in bulk, so we just use that colour for it. They're the main colours that's gone onto that before we do anything with it. Okay. Next part. At the colour. I've got a full one there. This is another Games Workshop. It's a wash or a shade as they call it, and it's called Agrax Earth Shade. Now, it might not look like much. It's very liquidy. If it's such a word. Very liquid. And what we do with it is we wash over the figure, whole figure, everything. And as you can see, what it does is it runs into all of the all the creases in the figure. It's great doing this with metal figures because done properly, the designer will put a lot of creases into them. And there's no reason why it can't be done with any other kind of figure. Any of the 3D prints should be able to take it as well. So there won't be a problem with it. But that's what we do. We completely cover it with the Agrax. From there, you go back to your original colours that you had, which is the next stage. The reason I haven't done the Agrax is it takes a little while to dry. It is because it's predominantly more liquid than the acrylics are. It does take quite a while to dry. So what I'll do is I'll show you what we're aiming for, which is that. If you have a look. I'm just making sure I haven't picked the wrong one up. This colour now has the hang on a second. Sorry about this. There we go. Yeah, what we've done with that one is I've gone back over it with the Prussian blue into the creases on the coats. So find one that needs doing, and I'll show you how to do it. So I picked an empty one up. That was clever. This is not supposed to happen. Right, there we go. You don't need very much when you're doing single figures because we do them in bulk. And it's more of a sort of production line we use quite a bit. Right, so if we take the figure, this is the original one that we've just had the Agrax on. Okay. What I'm going to do is, I need the light over here for this. I'll just paint part of it to show you what we do. You go across the top of the creases, so you leave what I would describe as the crease looking dark. Now, hopefully you can see this. See where the blue's gone onto that? So it's different to the other side.
Yep.
So that's the Prussian blue that's gone onto it to achieve that effect. Same with the rest of the figure. So if you go down the back of it, on the back of these, there was a crease where the cloth had a hem. on some of the overall jackets. So I'll paint that side of it and I'll show you what it looks like. So it stands out. Okay. That's a stock way that most wargamers will paint something. That's a nice, simple, easy way of putting it together. Now the same effect, that's the first one that's gone on there. Same effect as with the other colour, which was for the trousers. Because it's dark, as it is, when you come to paint on the lighter colour, which I'll show you, and it will stand out. Because if you look at cloth from a distance, as I'm sure you're aware, there are highlights and lowlights to it. So you see the leg, which should be leg here, lighter than the other one.
Yep.
Just do the other leg while I'm doing it. You don't have to be any kind of, for want of a better word, artist to do this, because if the figure has the creases on, it's almost like painting by numbers. Did you have another look there? Because you're filling in the creases. It's difficult to show this. It always looks different on a camera to what it does in real life. Of course, I've got the light here, which doesn't really help. That's the next part of it. White that was painted on before, you literally go over it again with white, which and all it does is, where it looks dirty on that white with a cloth, and it was in his pocket, just makes it stand out. Okay. There's nothing else you can do with that. He does have a tie on. So if you either side of the where the tie is, it looks white on here because it hasn't been painted yet. But all you're doing is you're just highlighting where the shirt is. And that gives it gives the appearance. A lot of this is what is appearance rather than actual finished item. Because it's not until it gets to the last stage where it comes together and you can see exactly what you've done. Right. We are the paint of flesh now. If you look at somebody from a distance, and I'm sure some people might not agree with this, but it's something that a lot of people in wargaming have picked out. Because if you're looking at something that's on the other side of the table, you can't see its eyes. It doesn't matter where they are, you cannot see their eyes. You look at somebody from a distance, you can't see their eyes. What you see is, I'll take my glasses off, you see the features, the bits where the light hit, which are probably what you can see by this, nose, the cheeks, the forehead, which is slowly going even further back, chin, and round the mouth. The ears, of course, and any other fleshy parts. So what we do is we only paint the bits that would be seen from a distance, because if you can see somebody's eyes coming at you from a distance, they're upset. That would be the best way of putting it. That's why whenever we used to say when they were talking about, I mean, it's gone back to the Zulu Wars until you see the whites of their eyes. That's how close they had to be, because from a distance you can't see somebody's eyes. So whenever anybody paints eyeballs into small figures, it looks as if they're staring at you. Now, somebody somewhere is going to ask us about brushes at some point, so I'll just tell you what I'm using. What's the name of these? There's a company called Javis that does different products for wargaming and sells all sorts of flock, things like that. They also do brushes. This is one of the Javis brushes. It's a 4-row brush. It's probably about the smallest that I've got that I trust for doing faces. However, across in this country, we have a company called The Works. It's more of a craft place now. It's tending not to do as many things as it used to. The other brushes from The Works. You get 4 brushes for £2.50. If you want to go out and spend an absolute fortune on brushes, then it's fine. But the amount that we go through, I don't use expensive brushes because you don't need it. That's 4 brushes for £2.50, and they're 0, 3, 0, 5, 0, and 10, 0. There's not really that much difference between the 10, 0 and the 5 zeros on them. But, oh, my light's just gone off. No. Oh, excuse me a second. Yeah, there's not that much difference between
the meter.
Sorry?
I say you need to put another shilling in the meter.
Kick the plug out, would you believe? But never mind. So that's the brushes we use. I mean, we do use larger brushes as well. I mean, we use some like this. I use for doing larger objects like dry brushing, and they've got a flat end to them. Dry brushing isn't. I can use dry brushing on figures, but it's a technique I try not to use too much. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is a good technique. Right. What I'll do is I'll show you as we're going down the nose. I don't know if you can see that or not. So you start to pick out, trying to get it at a decent distance. See it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's literally just the nose painted. Across the top of the lip and the chin. If I do one half of his face to give you an idea, hopefully it'll show up against it. There's no problem with the lighting when you're doing anything with a computer, that way. So that's half of his face. That's all we do with it. Leave this part here dark. Do the cheek, the ear, nose, and if you can see the forehead. And that's with a basic colour, just a normal flat flesh that's gone on to where we've inked with the others. Finish this off. When it comes to doing the hands, that's really what you've got to look at. If you put your own hand out in front of you, like that, you can see there's dark parts to it and light parts. So when you come to paint the actual figures, you can give it a representation, or you can actually individually paint the figures. The fingers, sorry. Main thing about all this is it's practice. You can't never lose faith if you pick up a figure and you paint it and you think that looks horrible. Try again. Try a different one. See the way his hand is? It's very difficult to show you this, but the fingers are painted in. The good thing about the metal figures is that they do have fingers, because when a sculptor sculpts them, he puts the detail on himself. And because he's using a putty rather than any kind of, well, I suppose a render or something like that, as you would get with some of the programs that they use on the computer, when they get printed, the actual rubber takes on, well, an exact copy of what went into it. Slightly smaller, but an exact copy. And a slightly smaller bit comes down to shrinkage in the mold, which is not really, it's not noticeable. But that's why you can see fingers on metal figures, and you actually get more detail on them because the designers put the detail on. So that's the face. Now, the thing about all these is they're not finished at that, because with the blue, which is a very dark blue, the Prussian blue we used for the jacket, what I'm going to do now with this, because it doesn't just color, it's got multiple layers. You can see if you look at anything. So just put a tiny little bit of white in it, because you don't want it too light, otherwise it will stand out. But it is literally the top highlight when you're painting it. So if you take the figure that I'll use the next one down, that's had the first of the blue highlight put onto it. I'll just do one side of them so you can see them against the other side. And what you're looking for is where the cloth would crease and show as a highlight. Now,
Oh, yes.
okay. So from a distance, which is really what you're looking at these things at, on a layout, you're looking at things from a distance. That's good. That's three. Well, it's actually four colours on that. Even though it doesn't look as if it's taken very much, it's four colours it's gone onto it. So that's what makes it stand out. And the same again with the other blue, the lighter blue. Take a little bit, put it on your palette, not on your thumb. A little bit of white into it. Okay. Now the denims that they used to wear, you could actually paint these almost, well, very light blue. I know that when my dad was on the railway, the denims he used to bring home, eventually they got that washed out. He used them for doing house painting in. And they were very, very light, like a stone washed denim by the time they'd finished. See that one? That's the lighter on the trousers.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives the impression of the different colours. Now with the faces, you used a flesh before. What I then do is I take a light flesh, another Vallejo colour, but I don't put it straight on as light flesh. Otherwise, it looks as if they've put powder on the faces. So if you mix it in with the flesh that you've still got, your palette, it darkens up the lighter flesh. So it's almost an intermediate colour between the two. And this is the bit where if you stand in front of a mirror with a light at some point and you shine the light on your face in different ways, you'll find that there's certain points, highlights, and others will remain dark. So what I'll do is, and I'll do it on this one to show you, is literally what would be the highlights on the face. If I can get this, which is down the nose, the top of the cheek, and just above the eyes. And to get that in focus, so it's a bit better. It does, I mean, it doesn't look very good on the camera, unfortunately, but it is a much lighter colour. And all it does is it shows up the nose, under there, and just on the top of there. That's where the light catches anybody who's if you're standing in there outside. On the hands, what I'll do is touch the lighter colour onto the knuckles. So you paint up the knuckles as if they're four dots. And I'm not sure whether it's going to show up well, but the same with the fingers. You can actually put the knuckles onto the fingers. It might not come out very well, but that's what I've done with it. And it's on both sides, on the hand as well. It's in the, see if we can get it, that hand there.
Yep.
It doesn't. Unfortunately, this is one of those things that's not gonna look wonderful unless you actually see it in the flesh because of the colours and cameras and things like that. But that's what we do with the faces. So when it's done with the face and the other colours on, that's what it's starting to look like. So you're getting in the different shading and everything that goes with it. What I've done with this one is painted the hat black because the grease tops were always black, and the boots, just keep them black. That keeps them simple. You could paint them brown if you wanted, but normally it will be black. that's the next stage to it. It's just straightforward, flat black, matte black. And then you start putting the detail on. Painted his tie as well on that one with a matte black, so that stands through. That is almost the figure finished, other than the next stage, which is the badge on the hat. What I always do is, if you look at the British Rail for, well, after 1948, all the badges had a gold background, and it was the colour that was put onto them as for the region they were. And my dad was LNER, and before he went on to British Rail, so he was in the northeast. So when I paint the gold on like that, you let the gold dry. The gold doesn't take long to dry. It's another one of those colours. It's a Vallejo colour, very quick to dry. And then the final bit is just touching red onto the, you can't really see it that well on here, but it's a little touch of red onto the hat, onto the badge, and that gives you the background. I use red because it was more of a, it should be like an orange colour for the northeast. But once the red goes on from a distance, it can go as LMS or northeastern, which is why we always do them that colour, to cover a couple of different areas. That's the finished figure.
That's brilliant.
You can go a little bit further, which we sometimes do, but not for everybody, because there's a lot of people try not to, well, it's not that they don't like it, but they like the figures to look as if they're clean. This one doesn't. It doesn't look very good unless I put it next to that one. It's going to be interesting. You can see there's one's darker than the other. This one's darker than that one.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done with that is, because it's dirty, we use another Vallejo colour, which is a wash called oiled earth, and a wash over what would be dirty, which is the front of the overalls, the legs, the backside, if you ever got a chance to sit down, and the back of the legs. Actually put it on the faces, but what it does is, with that, it doesn't look like natural dirt, whereas with clothing it does, because it goes into the colours. And that anything you want to do with that, you make it even dark if you wanted. It would look a lot, a lot more grimy. But that's all we do with them. It depends on what we're doing. I mean, we use British Rail as later British Rail in the corporate. I've noticed a lot of people like to paint them blue. Blue, it's like everything else. Apparently there's 37 different NATO greens. Okay, they all come from different manufacturers, and it was the same with the railway uniform. There wasn't just one manufacturer for the railway uniforms. My dad's uniform was black. From a distance, it was black. On photographs, it's black. But I have seen the lighter colour that everybody likes to see is blue for the British Rail colour corporate uniform. There's nothing wrong. You can use that blue, but all the ones I had were black. Everything I got my hands on the bloke and my dad was black. I mean, whether or not it was because he worked on the coal train, I don't know. But it was everything, all the actual PR colour was black. And it was the same with the lads he worked with. So maybe they got a different batch to everybody else. But I've had one or two people say it should be blue. It's actually no. It can be either one of the two colours, black or the blue. I've done a lot of research into them, because you've got to get it right. It's part of the realism of everything. It's like, don't put somebody in a logo to drive by itself. How does it work? But it is part of it. But to put it through, I think you've got to have it in. People, as in passengers and things, they're the same with passengers. You need them on railways. I'm just trying to find another figure we might be able to use. This is one of our new figures. It's one of the from a Pullman crew. Let's have a look. I'll quickly do this one while I'm talking here, and we'll show you what it's like, rather than using just a blue one. Of course, the thing about Pullman was a lot of them, they had the white jackets, but they also had they had blue lapels on the jackets as well, which is like a Prussian blue. I've just been told by my wife that that's a French one. Have you got one of the other ones, please? My glamorous assistant's not working very well tonight. You did have one, didn't you? One of the new ones? Sorry about this. There's that. Right. This is just trying to get ready for next week. Right. I'll show you them. This one is a British Pullman, not the French one. Is one of the new figures we've just done. Showing somebody to a seat. So what I'll do is I'll do the face. This is at the stage where it's been inked. So it's been washed over. It just needs the final highlights and everything putting onto it. Do the face, and then I'll show you what we do with the other parts to the uniform. I'm getting any paint out. Same process that we use for the others, because we do the same with all of the faces. So down the nose, under the chin, across the top of the lip, forehead, ears, sometimes the back of the neck. Somebody said, can we see your workbench?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can ask the question as
No,
soon as possible.
never leave the top off the paints, which I keep telling Michelle, who's sitting opposite us. We never leave the top off the paints, do we, Michelle?
No.
There we go. Because they're dry. The problem with acrylics is that they will dry out if you leave the top off, even in the frozen north. The workbench, for want of a better word, at this precise moment is a box of paints in front of us, because I wasn't going to do it at the workshop itself, where I've got them out on. I actually have them out into little racks and things like that. So this is just the stuff I'm working with at the minute, which is why there's not a great lot to look at other than a palette. Right. So that's the. I'll just put the highlight on the face. We'll do that. Done what I did with the other one, and with the hands as well. Then the problem is just trying to get it right, so it's in the right place. But so the shadows down the nose, side of the mouth. Put the extra highlight on, then I'll move on to the uniform and show what we're going to do with that. There was some of them had for different periods. They had a white jacket. They tended to have one that was like almost like a dress jacket for the British Army at the time. That was a lot of the 1930s ones, and they carried it through into the 50s for the Pullmans. But there were also some that wore just what looked like a plain jacket with a coloured lapel, and they were some of the lads who actually worked off, not so much on the carriages themselves. They were the people who showed them on to the carriage, so they'd have still had the hats on when they were outside on the platform, which is what we're trying to do with this one. We do have figures that go on to the Pullmans as well. Right. So I've just done the same as what I did with the other one, which, fortunately saying, it doesn't show up very well on the camera, but I've highlighted the face by putting it down the nose, top of the cheek. Right. The blue that looks...
Just asking, Rob, how do you paint hair if it's showing underneath the hat?
Ah, right. I'll show you the back of it, the figure. We tend to, rather than, well, obviously depends on what the nationality is. We tend to just go for brown on most people, because it makes it's We do blondes as well, but mostly it's brown. If you take the any one of the colours, we use a flat brown. Was here it is. Well, it's actually a beige brown. That's where it is. Another Vallejo colour. If you paint the hair on, or paint over the hair that's on there, when you use the ink that we used, which was the earth shade, what that does is it goes into the creases in the hair, and you don't have to do anything else with it. Been handed an example. There we go. It's just getting what it looks. I was just thinking that. What happens is the hair. Oh, sorry. It's not shown very. It looks shiny at the minute because the ink's still wet on it. But what it does is it goes into the creases. So it looks much better under the light, unfortunately. But that's where it does. That's the whole thing about the wash that we use, or this Agrax Earth shade, as it's called. I could have thought of a better name. Right, the Prussian blue. It was a dark colour normally on the epaulets and the lapels of the not epaulets, on the lapels of the jacket. We use as another Vallejo colour. It's called dark Prussian blue. It is darker than the other colour that we used before. How it works. Everything seems to not want to come out tonight. There we go. So there's lots of people will be switching off now, thinking it's like watching paint dry.
Oh dear.
Right.
Oh dear.
Yeah, got my dad's sense of humour, unfortunately.
I'm sorry to have to deal with such a delicate subject at our first encounter.
Somebody needs muting. There we go.
Right, so what I've done there is I've painted the collar. Whoops, get it back, and lapels dark blue on it. Okay, so we'll let that dry. The other things that they tended to have on these was they had gold buttons. I use this gold because it's what I would describe. It's called glorious gold, and it's more of a fantasy color, but it's so bright that you never. Well, we've never sort of been able to find anything that's more gold. So what I've done is I've done his buttons. This really is bad, the camera, and the hat. There's a badge on his hat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, depending on what period they were all different. Sometimes you've just got to go for something that's generic because it's impossible to kind of cover everything unless you're picking out something in particular. Right. Do his tie as well. This one's got a normal tie on rather than a bow tie, which they tended to wear as well. Found at least from what I've seen in this country, 10 different uniforms for Pullmans. So sometimes you've just got to try and get to that point where you have to do something that's generic, unfortunately. Otherwise it'd be on forever, unless you want to try and pick out specific. Right. So I painted his tie black. So just left it. Well, the bow ties were black, definitely. Right, and round about his neck, where his shirt is, when it got ink on dark, now they had a bit of a standing collar on some of them on the shirts. So what I've done is highlighted the actual. I've highlighted the shirt so it stands out a little bit more. I don't know whether you can see that very well.
Yep, no, that shows well.
We've gone all funny. That's better. Right. What I'm also going to do is, you've got the jacket has been highlighted once already, but what I'll do is I'll go over parts of it again. So it makes it a little bit more white. There's pockets on the jacket. To make it look as if there's seams round about it. If you paint on the inside of the pocket, I'll show you what I mean when I do it. So where the pocket is. Oh, look. Very well. He's got a pocket on his breast. Oh,
up a bit. Up a bit.
That's it. A bit further. There we go. Sorry, I'm just getting it there. You can't see it very well. What I'll do is I'll show you another way around, making it so it looks as if it's standing out. Because although it was a different time and everything, as in most of these were the 30s and 50s when it was a smoky atmosphere, the clothes were still very white. I found a book which has got it tells you about dining and things for this country, or being on the trains and the Pullmans and the other buffet cars. And one of the things it said on it was that the uniforms literally boil washed quite a lot of the time, because it was the only way that could get them clean, because they had to look clean. Right, I've got the Agrax Earthshade ink again. Well, it's an ink, it's a wash. Right, so I'll show you that before I do anything with it. You can't see the pocket very well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go around the outside of the pocket, I'm exaggerating this just because of what it is, so you can see it. That's where the pocket is. Now that I've done that, what I'll do is I'll wipe a little bit of it off. So you take it, so you tone it right down, so the pocket's still there, but it's not as obvious. And that's just to give an impression of where it should be. And that's literally using that wash up rather than washing over the whole thing. What I tend to do on anything white, is to go down the front of it as well, so you can see where the join is in the coat, so you can make it stand out.
As you say, close up, it looks as if you've almost overdone it.
Yeah.
But from a distance, it's going to look very realistic.
That's the whole. I've done it again with the light. Excuse me. Sorry about that. There we go. Didn't last very long. That money in the meter, did it? Oh, there we go. Right. So that's what it'll look like when it's done. It's in the different techniques we use, as I showed Jackie when we first started. That's one of the war games figures we paint. One we make and paint. Yeah, and the different colours on there, the threads and all sorts. it's a similar technique to what we use for the others. Somebody's asked a question: do I use anything specific for a palette? I will show you this. The answer is no. Oh, actually, Michelle's just passed hers over. What was it when it started life? It was a plastic lid. That's what it looks like now. Because it dries quickly, if you can use different parts of it. I haven't done it with this one, but you can actually peel it off because it's a solid piece. But that's all we use. We don't use anything fancy because it's not. By the time you put everything into it, you don't really need anything fancy. Yeah. Well, Michelle's just pointed out that Agrax, the earthshade stuff, easily spills. Yeah, that's what she's saying. I'm not going to get into trouble over that one. So we use this, which came from, well, it's called a paint mate, and it was from Stony Bridge Structures. We've had that for how long? About 6-7 years. Yeah. I think when Gavin did them. But it's great for holding the pots into. When I'm in the workshop, I use something completely different. But it's a similar sort of idea where it just holds everything together.
There's a new trader actually coming to Gildex called EBMA Workstations, and they do almost all laser cut things to organize your workbench, which is going to be quite interesting. They do some fabulous.
They'll be good. I mean, there's a few different firms make them, and it is literally depending on what size pots you use. The one I've got in the workshop is for mostly Vallejo paint, so the holes are slightly smaller with them being this type, like a drop type. Others that'll just hold the Games Workshop size, which is like this. There's all different kinds. I've got another one that holds Life Color, which is the Italian firm, which do a good range of paints. Bit of everything, really. I mean, we don't just use those. We use some of the poster type paints as well. Not so much for painting the figures, but for painting buildings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, once it's got the primer on it, it works great. So it's just like everything else. I mean, the MDF ones are great because you can knock them about if you need to. I must admit, I don't with mine, so try and be careful with it, because it'll get damaged. Otherwise, like everything else, will get damaged. I know it sounds like it's not a great lot to it, but really, that's what we do. That's all we do.
Philip Taylor's just saying that you can get 3D printed paint wraps.
Yeah, you should do. Yeah,
well. Yeah.
Yeah. There's all sorts you can get out there. I've yet to find a decent one for holding your brushes though. I think Phil's shown us one there now. Yeah, that's it, Phil. Yeah. 3D printed ones. But it depends. I mean, I've got somewhere in the region of about, we're just trying to work it out before, about 250 to 300 different paints of different shades, different colors. We've been doing it a long time. So you collect stuff. I have got some pots of paint, which I've had for at least 10 years. Because it's not a color you use very often. And as long as you keep the top sealed on them, they'll be fine. You can water them down if you want. The only thing with watering them down too much is that they don't cover as well. A lot of the new Games Workshop colors, which is that type there, they will go on black as an undercoat or a primer, because the pigment's quite strong in them. There's a yellow which they use. It's got some fancy name, Avalanche Sunset or something like that, and it's probably the best yellow for a first coat I've ever seen. Having said that, we also have another one which is this one. It's model color, and it's called yellow ochre, and it's great as a base coat for yellow if you're starting to paint yellow into things. Yep, they do Leo do reflective colours as well. So if you've got anything that's, I would say after 1993 for British, that's proper fluorescent paint, orange. It does go on well. It gives the impression of high vis. We've got a green version of it as well for the roads. For the earlier stuff for British Rail before they started getting the high vis, for the track workers and everything, we use this as a base colour, which but it's called bright orange. And it worked out great. And then once we've put the ink onto it and then go back over it again, it gives you the creases in the jacket in the actual top. Sorry, oh, the cat's just decided to join us as well. But it's like everything else, you know. I mean, any colours that you want to use, you can paint on without any problem. We use, as I said, depending on the primer that you're using. For a lot of things, but we've sort of lots of bits of equipment for wooden things. We use a brown primer from a firm called Army Paints. Very rarely use anything from Halfords. People will swear by it, but the thing about the Colour Forge, the Games Workshop colours and things like that, and the Army Painter is they are specifically made to paint metal and plastic. They're not meant for spraying a car. So there is a big difference. I mean, you can use any of the primers that you use on cars without any problem. But quite a lot of these paints now that are coming out, and they're not expensive compared to what some of the other colours are. Humbrol, I would say, pretty expensive for what they are. This one here, this Tempest Blue we use for the beginning of the steam uniforms. I think they've just gone up £10.80, but it's for a 500ml can. So they are, and it goes a long way. It really does. I know that Skytrex, because they're affiliated to Warlord, which is a war games company, I think Dave from Skytrex quite often carries the Army Painter paints with them now, which are great for priming things. Slightly more expensive, I think, than the colour, or smaller cans than the Colour Forge, but sort of price. And as Michelle's just said to me there, that's roughly what we do, and that's it. So it doesn't sound much, but that's our work.
So, undercoat first, then the base colour.
Yep.
Then the Agrax Earthshade ink wash, as you called it.
There are other makes out there that will do it, but we found that this one is the right colour and it comes out right. I tend to use it on all sorts. I use it on N-gauge as well when I'm painting figures, because it's difficult to pick out facial features on N-gauge. So if you wash it with something like that, it shows you where the face is. Much better.
Then you go back and improve the colours where you need to.
Yep.
And then you do your highlighting on and the detailing around the nose and the highlight areas and things.
Yeah.
Well, see, I've been totally wrong, because I wanted it all beautiful and detailed, and I've tried to paint creases in, and then it looks too obvious.
Yeah.
So this wash,
I probably should have shares in it, actually, because Michelle drinks it. I'm sure she does, because we go through that much. She must do something with it.
And do you buy that online if our modelers wanted to get some of that wash to put?
I think, well, Games Workshop now are probably right across the world. I know there's certainly still places, I'm sure Phil will tell us, there's places in America. We could probably bring some with us down to Stafford when we come down, just to let people see where it is. And I'll bring some of the paints as well for people who want to come across and speak to us. But we might have, if we can get a hold of some, we'll bring it with us. It's about, that comes in, I'm trying to think what size this is. Do you believe it hasn't got 18 milliliters? So it's 0.6 fluid ounces. That's the size it normally comes in. And I think it works out about £4.80, but you'd be surprised how much and how long it lasts. Michelle said it's a game changer. She's throwing things at us from on the other side of the table here. It's great for painters. It certainly is for us when we're doing huge orders for people, armies for people and things like that. We can get stuff done a lot quicker by using that method now than we could when we used to use the old method, which was, as you said, to paint everything in.
What would be really helpful, Rob, and Peter's just reminded me there, is to actually, if Michelle doesn't mind emailing over a list of some of the paints you've mentioned, because I know you mentioned about the Colour Forge, you've mentioned Citadel, you've mentioned the Agrax Earth Shades, Army Painter paints, so, and Vallejo, I can't
Vallejo.
Vallejo, I know. I always want to say that it's got a J in it, hasn't it? I think.
And the other one's Life Color, which is the firm from Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good paints. But don't, and what we normally do if we go to Italy, I try and pick some up when I'm out there. You can get them in this country. There's some model shops will sell them in this country without any problem. But I think I can't remember the name of the guy. He's one of the traders. He quite often brings the box sets of them along because they did a box set for British Rail. Well, for early BR with the green, and they did another one for BR blue. So they do try and make specific colours. Most of the ones I've got from them are for doing things like woodwork, smoke, different effects, because they do a lot of effect paints as well. A bit like AK, which are great. They're just as good. Similar sort of idea.
AK.
Yeah.
I know I've had Life Colours before, but I get so confused. I mean, flesh, they do light flesh, mid flesh, dark flesh, and then you're trying to mix it. How much mixing of paint do you actually do, or do you tend to stick with the actual shades that you prefer?
I do as least as possible, because when we start mixing paints, and I mean, I always do. I've done this with the earth, with the flesh. It's a flat flesh I use from Vallejo. I've used the same sort of paint for years because I've got used to doing it, and then we add the light flesh to it. Especially with things like that, we do have darker fleshes that we use as well. Obviously, not everybody's the same skin color, and we use different colors for that as well. But I suppose really it's what you're comfortable with. We don't use it because we do batches rather than a single figure. We tend not to waste them, so we stick with the same colors if we can that we've used all the time. So the flesh is saying if you can get different kinds of flesh, people are different. We know everybody's different color. So there are some of the sets which are great for that. I mean, I'm trying to think. There's another color that Vallejo used, which is another kind of flesh. They call it basic skin tone, which I've tried before and I thought was incredibly light. So I don't know who they based it on, but I would have said that the flat flesh is probably a better one to work with because it's more in the middle for white colors, if you know what I mean. Different flesh colored than white. I use another one called dark skin tone. If we're painting Mediterranean colors or anything like that, not a great lot of mixing. It's only when I'm highlighting things, I'll stick a little bit of white in. You've also got to be very careful when you put white into things, because if you put in too much, it becomes very light. You have to be very sparing with the white when you mix it with colors.
I think the other thing I've done wrong in the past when I've mixed paints is something's then gone wrong, which it inevitably does, and you've got to try and think about what you mixed to try and get the color the same again, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's one of the other things. What years ago when I was limited to how many paints I had, I would try and I used to write things down for the colors and everything, so I could remember what they were. I've got a little sort of box with index cards in the workshop, and it's full of all different colors of uniforms that I've used over the years for different things. I mean, you'd be surprised how many different, like I said before, there's 37 shades of NATO green. So where do you start? you've got to try and match them in wherever a different uniform is. Then that's the closest you can get. Which is why with the blues for the overalls for the denims and everything, you can use all different colours. I mean, you can start with what they started with, which was a very, very deep blue. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we use it's called dark Prussian blue, which would probably be a nice deep colour for what colour they were. And then you can work right down to a sky blue because they're washed out. There wasn't much in the way of, tended not to have colour fast in the cloths, why things would wash through. The Victorians, with their uniforms, that's one of the reasons why they tended to be black, because of the dye in things. It was probably easier to get something that was darker than it was to get it in a different colour.
Okay, I don't want to hog it, so please do put questions into the chat. And obviously, if anybody wants to ask a question, more detailed question, just put a note in chat saying, can I unmute and ask a question? Because Peter and I can't see absolutely everybody in the room. So it's really helpful to just know if somebody specific wants to ask a question. I'm just going to give people a chance to ask questions, ask you about lips.
Lips, right. If I'm painting something that's bigger than these are, I mean, I'll paint anything up to, well, model-wise, I've painted up to 120mm size figures. O gauge, this is where the wargaming and the railway people are into two completely different areas with sizes. An O gauge figure is 1/43 scale. The closest you'll get to it in wargaming is about 40mm in height, roughly. 10mm wargames figures are N gauge. 1/87th for HO, or 1/76th for double O. 1/76 is what they call 20mm in wargaming. So I would say if you're going to start painting anything like lips, which I have done on what we call that size, which is 28mm figures, you can do it. What you've got to remember is the bottom lip is the lip that's seen, not really the top lip. So if you paint it, what I've tended to do in the past is I haven't used red or anything like that. It's been more of a rose color would be a better way of putting it. I think I've probably got one. I had one. No. No. Is that it there? Right. Well, I've got here called salmon rose, which is difficult to see the actual color of it. Unfortunately, that's darker than the flesh. As long as you paint it with something that's darker than the flesh, then you've got your lips. I mean, some of the wargames figures have teeth, but they've got the mouths open because they're running at something. So they look as if they're shouting. What I tend to do is I'll paint the teeth the pale flesh color. Teeth, especially looking at older figures and things like that, or older people from past years, teeth weren't white. They're an ivory color anyway, quite often. And then because the dentistry was rubbish, they were probably much even darker than that. But the one good thing about railway figures is there's no teeth on show, or very rarely. So lips, I would say probably not pink, but like salmon color would work. Obviously, depending on what color the person's skin is. If I've been painting, trying to think of the right sort of color, we use different colors for different things. I've done some figures which are, saying if we were painting before about Zulus and things like that, because it is a period that people still war game quite a lot. Because they're African, you've got a different set of colors you can paint. And as I know Vallejo do specific colors for things like that, if that's what you're looking for. There are colors out there to do it with. Just depends on what you want. There are a new set of colors as well. I just reminded, which are called contrast colours that Citadel's come out with, Games Workshop. That's one of them. It's well, they've given it a funny name, Warp Lightning 3. You can paint this directly onto another colour. It comes out, I think the best way to put it, I paint that onto white and it will come out as a green colour. Because the whole idea is that because of the way it's made, though, the pigment allows it to form its own creases. Be a good way of putting it. Anything I can use it on, anything that's undercoated. It's a great one overall. I'll try this one. Normally I would paint it on white because it's a different thing. It's a heavy sort of ink wash. And that's a grey figure. Painting it onto some of it. I don't want to paint too much on because this figure actually has to be grey when it's finished. Found painting the reds onto colours, things like the British Army, who everybody thinks is a lovely red. It wasn't. It was a very washed out red because it didn't have any colour fast. Right, that was literally just putting that onto there, which has turned it into a green. Quite a few different firms now coming out with these contrast paints where you can put them on anything. It doesn't look as if it's done very much, but it literally shades itself. Trying to get it into the light so you can see it. It's not a very good way of doing it.
That's fine.
Yeah, but it just shades itself. That's another one. It's a good one to use. Citadel used them. Vallejo's got a new set come out, which cover it. Same sort of thing, but it comes in the dropper bottle. There's quite a few of the paint firms are now looking at things like that. It's all to try and get people to paint their own figures. Trying to make it easier, especially for if you're trying to paint hundreds of figures in one go. Which I mean, it's great for us because we can do things like that. I don't use it all the time, I must admit, but for certain things I've used it, and it excuse me, it comes out great. I mean, see that? Yeah. Right, that blue that's on there was one of the colours. That's one of their wash colours. That's what it came out like. So you can use it. It's great. But like everything else, they tend to go for fantasy things because that's what they're meant for, as a fantasy market. So you've really got to pick and choose which colours you want to use on anything like that. But say the Vallejo colours might be. I haven't actually used their what they call contrast paints, the ink wash type paints, but I think they're trying to head towards a market where it's not specific to fantasy, which is what you get a lot of these with the Games Workshop stuff. That's why they've got strange names. Stop people from copying the paints, because the Games Workshop constantly are fighting a battle with the trademark, which really I don't think a lot of people care about anymore. But that's what they do.
No, Peter was just saying that Vallejo offers some great multicolour sets, which are saving in terms of, instead of buying individual colours, you can get these sets.
There's quite a lot out there. I mean, it depends on where you go to try and buy them. I know, and this is why I always laugh. And I would love to get wargamers and railway people in the same room at the same time, because there's so many things that could go over together and find wargamers, without being horrible to the wargaming fraternity. Wargamers do not like spending money. If they can find something cheap, one of a better word, or not as expensive, they'll find it. That's why a lot of these colours, if they can get their hands on them at a decent price, go around telling everybody where they got them from. Good for that.
Like you say, they're painting whole armies, aren't they?
Well, that's it. I mean, that's the difference. think because we paint so many figures in one go, and we tend to, because we're doing them on block with the railway as well, we'll do a batch that's got blue, that start off like with a blue primer, or black, or wherever we're doing with them. I mean, we've got figures which are sitting ready for me to do or to finish off, because Michelle paints the block colours onto them, and highlight and does the highlight on the uniforms, and then I'll finish off the colours. And I must admit, I've got quite a few sitting here which have got to be done before next week. So I know where I'll be doing this week. Aston. And if they're in a block like that, we can work through them. If they're if it's one-offs, which is a question people always ask you, how long does it take to paint a figure? Don't know. How long does it take to paint a figure? It's the drying time. Yeah, exactly. It's not so much the painting of the figure, it's the drying time. The good thing about acrylics is it dries quickly. So if somebody ordered something that we didn't have in stock, we could probably have it out to them by the next day if we weren't, if we didn't have anything else that needed to be done. Otherwise, because everything's done in a block, it cuts down the time that we spend painting, so we can do other things. I mean, it's not, don't just paint at cast things and make figures, convert them, do different bits and pieces. Michelle works on the laser, doing buildings and stuff, and little bits and pieces for people. So if you want to paint figures, you can do it. You can do it in an evening, no problem at all, as long as you haven't got maybe 50 or 60 sitting in front of you. But if you're just doing individual figures yourself, there's no reason why you can't sit down and do enough to, even put enough into a coach. Not a problem, but it's getting people used to it and knowing that they can, have the confidence to paint. I think that's what part of the problem is with painting figures. I think that's why on a lot of people's layouts, there's not much in the way of figures on them. The way it is, people tend not to go for things like that. They prefer to go for something like a loco, but really, you remember that people made the railways. The railways didn't make people.
Sometimes it's about trying to get a balance right, though, isn't it? Because you can overpopulate some, like a village station, and then they've got 10 people standing there. You think, well, how many times would you have actually had that many passengers waiting?
Well, that's it. I mean, especially a village one pre-1963, which is why this goes in the railways, wasn't it? I mean, that's what you've got to look at. But having said that, I've seen what I would describe as some major stations which have got on the platform. You think, yeah, maybe now, but in the 60s, in the 70s, still using the trains a lot. So that it's all part of it. Same with putting blindside equipment on things. It was there. You can't ignore it. It's just different things that might have gone on.
People inside buildings, people inside carriages, drivers and firemen are quite useful.
Well, that's
surprising how many locos you see that have got no crew.
No, I must admit, I always find that quite disheartening, really, more than anything else. And there's plenty of people out there make figures. It's not just us. Anybody, and as long as they put something in, I personally like to see people. I don't buy books, and this is not nothing wrong about anybody who buys books on logos. I don't buy books on logos. I will get books if they have people in them, because I find people more fascinating. Not that I've got anything against the logos, because I haven't. That's otherwise I wouldn't be modelling railways. I would just be modelling people, But people, they should be there. You can't ignore it, and getting them in the right clothing for the period, to me, is as important as somebody putting together a layout and sticking a diesel on it, and then everybody else shout at them, you can't have that one there because that's not the right year for it. Well, So why bother putting somebody into a logo or stand on a station that isn't the right period? It's exactly the same. So do a bit of homework. I do. I spend a lot of time looking at books. You know, I mean, I'm doing Eastfield in the club at the minute, which I know quite a few people have been watching. One that's going to Glasgow. Yes, it is Glasgow next year. And Mick, whose layout it is, I mean, he said to us, the figures are yours. You put on whatever you think should be on there, because otherwise there'd be nothing on it. Because all they're bothered about is all the diesels running about on it. So they're leaving it up to me, which is good. But they said that's what you do, so that's what I'm going to do. Not advertising Eastfield, by the way, but it's in Glasgow next year. It's got real Model Rail Scotland. If anybody wants to see what I would describe as a monster, because it's 75 foot by. He's just done Queen Street, or busy doing it at the minute. It's 75 foot by about 30 foot.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think it's going to Perth as well the year after. I haven't actually worked out how it's going to get there, but I think Nick's out.
7.5 ton truck.
Definitely. Or at least one. I think he's already organised that, because he used to be a lorry driver. Got it organised with some of the lads he worked with. So it's getting shifted. I think it's actually getting a removal up there without us getting our hands on it. It's fine by us. It's upstairs on the first floor.
Magnifying. Do you use a magnifying light, or do you use any sort of magnifying spectacles, or?
Michelle does, yeah. She just passed hers across to us. That's what she uses. Probably sees covered in paint. That's what she uses.
All right.
In fact, they are covered in paint. Yeah. I don't. I only use my glasses. And the only reason I use the glasses now is because, Michelle says don't go there. I got an injury years ago when I was in the police, and my right eye sees very close up, but my left eye doesn't. And so my left eye, I need glasses now for my left eye to keep up with my right eye when I'm looking at things close up. And I wear glasses with the corrective lens on the right side, so I can see distances. Just what happened. I don't use anything else because, I don't use a magnifying glass because I don't need to. Michelle does. She uses one. She needs to do it. Actually, I've got your glasses on as well.
No.
She had her glasses on as well as a magnifying glass. But she's got a light as well, which is one of these ring lights that has the light around the outside of the actual magnifying part to it. So she uses that. I just use a normal light. Well, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, there's lots of them out there. They're absolutely brilliant, and I think anybody that wants to see up close, great. Use it. It's excellent. I'd never criticize anybody who uses anything like that. Brilliant. The main thing is you can see what you're doing.
Okay, if we've got any more questions, if anybody needs to unmute, you're more than welcome.
Philip Taylor asked, do you do anything different for passengers in a coach?
Right. What we've done with our passengers, we got them made slightly smaller when we did them, because, when this is something that's changing, as we've found, because we've got two sizes now, 148 passengers for quite a lot of the older type coaches, because nothing goes into it. What we'll do is, if we're doing a rake of passengers for a coach, we tend to use, we got some made in what they call Cycast, which is a thermoplastic injection resin, so the light for going into coaches. We'll get a lot of them. We'll take them in batches and we'll prime them different colours and then work from there. So, say if you want to do a few people wearing green, we do them all green, and then we work on that principle. Same as what we've done with the blue. But because you're using a few different colours with blue, green, black. Sometimes we do red ones, depending on where they are or who they are. We've got a couple of different shades of brown, so they all work on different colours. We very rarely use white as a primer, unless it's for something specific, you know, that if they have got white on. But otherwise, just exactly the same as what we do with the other figures. Just start with a different colour. Got the same detail on them and everything. We make sure all the detail goes onto them, because if the detail's on the figure, why not paint it? I know there's a lot of, well, not so much now. There was a lot of Chinese passengers appeared on eBay. I don't think you can get them as easy as you could get them before. And even then, they come coloured, which I love. You can paint them. There's not a problem. You don't have to undercoat them or prime them. You can start on the colours that they've started with, just as long as you use the Agrax Earthshade. Takes away all the, well, I would say that the lack of detail that there is in them, and it gives them a bit of depth. And then once they've got the depth, you paint the colour on top of them. It'll work, just like anything else. I've just noticed somebody says that if they're the ones that you bought at Wakefield, the fit corgi open top. Yeah, probably do. Yeah, they're the 1/48 ones. We did them deliberately like that because so they would fit into other things. They said almost 1/50th for the lorries and stuff like that corgi do. But we also do because we've got a way of doing it. We've also got a larger version in 1/43 for them to sit on platforms and things like that. So we got them made in 2 different sizes, and that was so that we could use them for different things and different eras. So I'm getting prompts from across the table here. Different eras. We tend to work from well, we've got Victorian Edwardian, 20s, 30s and 40s, 50s and 60s, and then the last ones we did were 70s, 80s passengers, which, yeah, I mean, they look completely different. Yeah.
One of the common queries is about high vis and when high vis jackets came in. You were always going to ask that, didn't you? You hated it. No, you sometimes see, you know, diesel era, and you'll see lots of people working with high vis on, and you kind of get that impression that you should be looking at that if you're doing a modern image, but then it's trying to work out when did they really come in, and is it appropriate or not?
That's the other week. I've spent a bit of time. Michelle saying, "Keep this short." I think it's because she knows I can go over and bored to death with high vis. High vis. The main thing I remember from high vis was before my dad retired, he actually started wearing what they call the short high vis bibs for driving the trains. Local drivers didn't, and I'll stand corrected if anybody else can tell us otherwise. Local drivers didn't start wearing the high vis until 1985, and it was the short bib. It wasn't a coat. It wasn't a big, bright thing, and even then, the high vis was more orange than it was what I would describe as the fluorescent color that they are now. I know that's the way it is. If you're talking about P-Way, permanent way track lads, it was the Clydeside Railway that got them first for the overhead in 1965. They were the first ones to wear it. They were on the track side with it. It wasn't until about 1969 you'd start seeing it on other parts of the country. I know a lad who worked on the permanent way in the 70s, and he said it wasn't until about 1974 that were actually given, or they were all sat down in front of a film, and they were told by the guy who was then he was the Minister of Transport, and he said to them, "I know you're not going to like this, and I really don't understand it, but you have to start wearing it now." That was the bib. It had no reflective strips on it at all. It was orange, and that was it. The only other time I've ever seen the orange in itself was an orange cloth coats And they did have a version of it, and we're going back to the 70s, where it was more or less like it was the same style as what they had when they were firing and driving the steam trains, where it was in orange, and that was what some of the shunters wore, but not very often. Tended not to wear that sort of thing. You don't, and the short bib for the P wave would have went right through until the late 80s, early 90s. And the lads who were in the permanent way, and I got this from one of the bosses, said that they started to buy their own. So what you get is a complete mixture of all different kinds of high vis that came in. Same with hard hats. Hard hats were worn. They were probably worn on the overhead electrification for the West Coast, but it wasn't something that the permanent way wore very often. It was only if they were working at height. Otherwise, they wouldn't wear it. The time when you really get high vis coming in is in the last corporate period of 1993, and then they went over the top, and they've got every silver strip you could possibly see. They've got blue on the shoulders, which is reflective as well, and they just went on like that. Just that was the start of it. When the corporate period, the last corporate period finishes, and they go into the private railways or the private ownership, then any colour of high vis would be used. They still didn't wear green on the lines for obvious reasons, because you could get mixed up with the signal. That was why they went for the orange. So high vis, permanent wear, anything from 1969 on the normal railways. I'd say normal, I mean main lines and stuff like that, anywhere on the system. Late 80s, the orange cloth I was talking about before, I've got photographs of lads working in Newcastle Station with it on, and they're working on the ballast, under one of the lines, and they've actually, the bib and braces that they had on the steam, they've got a version of that on, which is orange cloth, same as the jacket. Not high vis, it's just cloth, and it's so that could be seen. Proper high vis, nothing until the 90s. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's really useful.
Did I keep that short? It's gone on forever. Seriously, I've turned into a real anorak.
But it's important, isn't it? Like you said earlier, to get the actual clothing fit for the era.
Yeah.
And think about what you're trying to show. You know, the lady with the Victorian jacket on, you know, the coat on isn't going to fit on a normal 1970s railway.
Definitely not. No. I think the only time really where you can sort of blur the lines a little bit, 40s into the 50s, well, for 30s, 40s, and 50s, you can get away with a lot because of the war. You know, I mean, clothing did change in style, but a lot of it was still around from pre-war because they couldn't get a hold of the cloth. So they couldn't get a hold of the clothes. Simple as that. I mean, you had your coupons for rationing and everything, but they were still using stuff. You know, think about the Demob suit as a prime example. It was based on a 1930s suit. You know, and they were running around till the end of the 40s. My dad still had his for quite a while. I've got the photographs.
Okay.
Yeah.
We usually try and finish sort of around the 9:30, 9:45 time. So we're around about the end of the session at the moment. So before we just come back and check whether there's any final questions, I'd like to just be able to give people a preview of the next session. So I'm just going to do a quick screen share. Everybody see that all right?
Yeah.
Yep. So a big thank you to Rob Anderson, and obviously, as you've mentioned, Rob and Michelle will be at Gildex with Northumbria Painting Services stand. So if anybody does think of any more questions, or as you've said, wants to have a look at some of the paints and things, please pay a visit. I know that you'll be happy to answer questions if you're not overrun with people.
Yeah, I'll talk to anybody.
No, I mean, I've learned a huge amount and I really appreciate it because I hadn't heard about the ink wash and things. So I've learned a great deal.
I mean, there's lots and lots of different, different styles of painting still. I mean, you don't have to use the ink wash. You can just paint it as it is and put the creases in that way. The only reason we use the ink wash is to make it a lot easier and quicker, so we can go through everything a lot quicker.
I think when I've been painting creases in the past, it tends to look like a big black line, and that's the trouble is you can overdo it, can't you?
Well, this is it. And the good thing about, I mean, you can actually put the Agrax Earthshade on really thick. I do it sometimes with some of the War Games figures because they're a lot dirtier, want of a better word. I mean, I painted some of the crews for somebody for the Steam era, and I put them on really, really thick because he wanted them dirty, and it's a good way of starting it. So it just looks like ingrained dirt, you know. That's the way it works.
Okay, well hang on a minute, just got a strange thing gone back a slide there.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting here looking at Neil. That's scary. That.
Our next evening in September, 26th of September, is a Tuesday evening. And then we're going to be joining Neil Armitage, who actually does the weathering for Ellis Clark. So he works with Ellis Clark, and he was also involved in the Welcome to O-Gauge about weathering ready to run locos. This time he's going to be talking about discussing rather weathering ready to run stock. A lot of people now are buying ready to run, but they want to actually make it their own. So, being able to weather it, make it look as though it's actually been used and hasn't just popped out of a box is something that's very important to people. So if you're interested in that, then do book for the September session. And the booking for that starts at midnight tonight as usual. And obviously this image of Neil will be on the front page of the website to replace Rob's mugshot. So
I was going to say he's much better looking. I'll tell him that when I see him next
I won't
week.
say he's got more hair though, because he hasn't.
Not anymore, no.
In terms of our next event, please don't forget that there's something called Gildex happening next weekend. The RMT and ASLEF are trying to scupper our plans, but we're hoping that we will have some trains running on Saturday. I understand that people are starting to see some timetables appear and that the final timetables of what will be running should be available on Wednesday or Thursday next week. And we're keeping the advance ticket desk open until 7 o'clock on Friday. So you can get an electronic ticket right up till then if you want to actually make sure that you've had a chance to organise your plans. The bus transfers will be happening from the rail station regardless of what happens with the rail strike, because we know a lot of people stay in Stafford Town Centre not far from the station and require the bus to get them up to the showground. And obviously, there's going to be all the layouts, demonstrations, society stands. And if you go to the website at the moment, you can download the whole show guide and the floor plans and everything and start your shopping list. And there is camping. So we've had a sort of last minute rush on people wanting to bring motorhomes and caravans, and you can hook up if you want to for, I think it's £20 a night, which isn't bad for being able to do that. So, if you can't get there on the Saturday, then perhaps come up a couple of days earlier and join some of the others who are coming to stay on site. If you want to click on the Gildex thing, it will take you to the area where you can book. So that's always on the front page. And then don't forget that if you do buy advance tickets, you're going into the L-Cut Creative 10-year celebration of being able to be a prize winner for £100 voucher for products from them. So it's their 10th anniversary and they gave us 2 tickets for 2 vouchers for Kettering, 2 for Kempton, 2 for Barnsley, and there are 4 available for Gildex. So we'll have 2 vouchers for 1-day ticket holders and 2 vouchers for 2-day ticket holders, and that's for advance ticket people who've registered for advance tickets. So well worth doing, and you get in half an hour earlier as well, and it's slightly cheaper than on the door. And then don't forget, for those people who aren't members, if you're interested in finding out more about the Gage O Guild, you can do a 1-month free trial and you'll get all the membership benefits, but electronically for 1 month. So you wouldn't actually receive a paper copy of the Gazette, but you'll be able to have access to the website and see all of the archives and what the latest Gazette and Guild news look like online. You'll be able to look at the forum, look at the O-Gauge modelling encyclopedia, which is called the Knowledge Base, see all our trader listings, the product directory, get into the YouTube channel and the galleries, and basically get on the forum and discuss modelling topics as well. So you get all the benefits electronically to see whether you like it. So it's a bit, as the poster says, try before you buy, if you're interested in more about the Gage O Guild. So that's it from me this evening. See you again on Tuesday the 26th of September for the evening with Neil Armitage. I'll just stop sharing that and we'll come back to the main screen, and I'll remove the spotlight from Rob just to see if there's any other people who want to ask anything. You're welcome to unmute before we leave. But certainly thank you very, very much, Rob. There's quite a lot of thank yous coming up in the
You're welcome.
Chat there. One from Andrew.
If anybody wants to come and speak to us at Gildex, I'm more than happy to to them.
Excellent.
Like
Thank
people
you.
at the stand.
And Andrew Jones is saying if anyone is planning to go to Keene House to use the Model Railway Club library, it's now shut until the end of October for refurbishment, so you don't get a wasted journey. That's very kind, Andrew. Thank you for letting us know that. As Rob's been saying, a lot of people do a lot of research and use that library and also the archives at the National Railway Museum. So there's lots of information out there if you're researching clothing or eras, etc. You've got lots of information that you can gather. But thank you very, very much, Rob and Michelle. Great double act, and it's really kind of you to spend the evening with us. And we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you. See you next week.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, both of you. And don't forget to send us the list of paints, please.
Yeah,
do that straight away.
Thank you very much. All right, and thank you, Peter, for being co-host. Much appreciated.